All right, everybody, welcome back to Are You Being Real? We have an absolutely incredible guest today. We got the one and only Andrew Horn in the house. Andrew, I've wanted to have you on the show since the beginning.
I'm excited to be here, man.
Yeah, we're about 160 episodes in. We made it happen.
There you go, 161, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. I remember before I even started the podcast, I saw you at Adam Ward and Stacey Story's wedding.
Yeah.
And we didn't know each other at the time. I had known Mickey a little bit from Burning Man, but I don't think we had met. And I just distinctively remembered our first interaction. You were so curious and inquisitive and asked me what I was passionate about or what I was working on. And I told you I was launching this podcast, and I think you might have asked me a question, like another question about, what's your biggest challenge as it pertains to that? It was just such a caring, endearing conversation that I've always held that with me, and you've been a huge inspiration to me. So I'm stoked to have you here on this show. I just have the greatest admiration for you as an entrepreneur, what you're doing with Tribute. You're speaking, you're just an incredible teacher. I love your signature gray top hat and how you really are a social disruptor. You're really not only helping people, but really creating positive change in the world. So it is a tremendous honor to have you here on the show.
Well, brother, as someone who asks a lot of questions, it's always nice to connect with someone who's willing to go there and to go deep. So excited to know you, to be here, and proud of all that you put into the world.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. And we've been chatting offline for about the last hour, and you've been asking me all these tremendous questions, and I've been purposely holding back with my questions because I knew you'd have so much gold to share, so I wanted to wait until we got mic'd up. So what I've been doing lately on the show, which has been a lot of fun, is just diving right into the deep end. So I'd love to start off this conversation with having you share a story with us, really starting out in the deep end, painting that picture of a really perhaps challenging or turning point in your life where you felt either your authenticity was really being challenged or a key pivotal crossroads moments of your life where you made a choice and it changed everything. Perhaps you discovered who you are. So I'd love to invite you to share.
Let's do it, man. Well, I guess that I'm going to take us back to Hawaii, which is where I grew up on the south side of Maui. And I think that it's funny that I'm going back there because now my life revolves very heavily around communication, with Tribute helping people to share their appreciation with the people they love, speaking on the art of meaningful conversation. But if I were to go back, my entire upbringing, I identified as being shy and struggling with mild social anxiety.
Really?
Absolutely.
That's shocking.
And this really culminated for me during my 8th grade homecoming dance, where I got up the nerves to ask my dream girl, Haley Sheffer, to go to the dance with me. She was very popular. I was very not popular. So when I walk up to her after recess, I ask her if she'd go to the dance with me. I was stunned when she says yes. And so I was so nervous that I literally had no idea what to say. So I just said, thanks, and then turned around and walked away. And so this was 2 weeks before the dance was actually supposed to happen. But every time I saw her, I still didn't know what to say. I was so nervous. She was with her cool friends. I was nervous that I was going to make a fool of myself. So I just started to avoid her every time I saw her. And so the next 2 weeks went by and I still didn't say anything to Haley Sheffer. So then the day the dance comes up, I've got on like my corduroy pants and like my Allen Iverson like sneaks, and like I'm looking super fresh.
Styling.
Exactly. And I
no
still,
top hat though?
No top hat.
Before the
That's going to come
hat.
a lot later. We'll get to the top hat for sure. But I still couldn't get up the nerve to talk to her. So we basically take our buses to the hotel. We go through 2 hours of the dance. I'm hiding in the bathroom for like 30 minutes of it because you can imagine that like the nerves have just been building for the past 2 weeks. And I still haven't said anything to her. And so then finally, the very last song of the entire dance is Casey and JoJo, All My Life.
So good.
Which, I mean, I'm like, okay, you have to go and do it.
It's your song.
So I finally go up. I ask her to dance. She looks at me and she was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, wow, it probably would have been a lot fucking easier if I had just done this 2 weeks ago and like asked you to be my friend and dance with me. So I remember coming home from that dance and just being so demoralized of being like, I'm ready to make a change in my life. And it just so happened that my parents were splitting up. So my dad was moving to Virginia. My mom was staying in Hawaii. And I had an opportunity to move. And, you know, that shyness kind of like pervaded through high school and college. I became more social But, still had the resistance to raising my hand in class, still had an aversion to taking leadership roles in clubs and fraternities, still overly worried with what people thought of me. And that was really kind of a pervasive part of my life. And then, after graduating from college, I really found the power of service, and I started my first company called Dreams for Kids DC. And that is this adaptive athletic provider. So it helps young people with disabilities to play sports. So you're like Washington Redskins football with 60 young people with full spectrum of disabilities, working on the ice with the Washington Capitals and 75 kids. So very cool stuff. And the first big break for me came when I met a guy who probably some of your listeners and certainly a lot of your guests know, a guy named Jeff Rosenthal. And so Jeff started an organization called the Summit Series, which has been called like a millennial Davos, brings together thought leaders from every industry, the academia, the arts, and basically helps people discuss ideas and just connect with one another. And so Jeff learned about what I was doing with Dreams for Kids. He invited me to come to the summit, comp my ticket for me because he liked what I was doing. And so for me, I had been hustling on Dreams for Kids in my free time. I was an executive recruiter with my day job. And so I'd been doing this as my side hustle for about a year now.
And how old were you at the time?
And so I was 22 when I got invited to Summit for the first time. And so I'm 22 years old. And so I know that there's going to be opportunities here for me to connect with the type of luminaries and philanthropists who can write one check and literally make this my full-time gig. So it's a huge opportunity. And so I'm practicing my pitch for 2 weeks. I'm getting ready for this big event. So big day comes. I'm like getting ready to head down to the JW Marriott in downtown DC. So I like put on my like corduroy sports jacket. Corduroy is becoming a theme here that I was not planning on. I've evolved to the gray hat now, which, much better. But I remember that as I got into this taxi cab, heading out of the JW Marriott, and I'm thinking about all the people that are in the kind of attendee list. And I'm looking through it on my phone. I'm just looking at like Tim Ferriss and Ted Turner and Jessica Jackley from Kiva. And I just remember this internal dialogue starting to say like, what are you going to have to say to these people about philanthropy? Like, what do you know about raising money for nonprofits? Like, who am I to be at this event? And it was in that moment that I literally felt a bead of sweat drip off my forehead and like land onto my cell phone. And I was just like, shit. And this happened to me so frequently that I literally had a wad of paper towels in my pocket that I had to pull out and like wipe my brow. And so now I'm in this like perpetual downpour of sweat. I'm freaking out. I'm in my head, and I get to the JW Marriott. So like I see all these cool looking young entrepreneurs, and I'm like, all right, like I got to get out of here. So I just dart past them. I head into the bathroom and I'm looking myself in the mirror. I'm like, you need to chill out. Like, do not blow this massive shot. And so I'm basically sitting there. I throw water in my face and I'm just like, chill out, dude. You got it. And I end up coming out of the bathroom and like, I'm going to get my name badge. I'm going to like take it easy. And then we're going to regain our focus. We're going to be all right. It's all good. So I walk out of the bathroom, and fate had a different plan for me. So as I walk out of the bathroom, I hear, yo, Andrew. And I look over, and it's Jeff. And he was like, come with me. And so he gave me a hug, and I was like, where are we going? And before he could give me an answer, he walks me through the JW Marriott, like glad handing all these people, introducing me. And then he opens these double doors, and there's this strange looking room with a circular table. And around this table, you have like 30 chairs on the outside, and you've got 30 chairs on the inside. And so basically what he says, he steps up onto a chair and he says, all right, this is a room of 30 of the top philanthropists and like venture funds in the country, and 30 of the top young entrepreneurs running nonprofits in the country. I want nonprofiteers on the inside, and I want philanthropists on the outside. You're going to have 1 minute to pitch your nonprofit, and then we're basically going to ring a bell, and you're going to have to switch to the next person.
It's like speed dating.
It's like speed dating for donations.
Wow, that's
so
amazing.
Like if you
Great
thought
concept.
that I was nervous when I get into this place, like now I'm like freaking out. The sweat comes back, pull out like the sweat towel out of my pocket, and I sit down. And, you know, again, I've been practicing this pitch for 2 weeks. It's like I believed so deeply in this organization. I cared so much about what we were doing, but I was in my head. And so I sit down with this first guy named Raj, and I'd find out that his family runs one of the biggest textile factories in Sri Lanka. They have like $100 million foundation. Like he could write one check for the 100K we were after, and I would immediately be full-time on this. And so even though I knew my pitch, like when he rings the first bell, I'm stumbling over my words. I start to go into our financials way too early. I try to come back, and like before I even know it, the bell rings. And again, it's like I was so in my head. I was so kind of like trying to perceive what other people thought of me. I was saying again, that this doesn't stack up with any of these massive nonprofits that are around you, whatever. And I just kind of went around to each of these 30 things and was just fumbling my words. And I was so aware of how big of an opportunity I was just kind of like shitting on. Yeah, to not miss my words. And so I remember walking out of that room and I basically just skipped away. I didn't talk to anybody. I went through like one other session, but then my conscience was like, just get out of here, man. Like, you don't want to put yourself through any more of this. And so I left the hotel that day. I went back to my apartment up in Adams Morgan, and I didn't know if I was going to go back the next day. Like, I basically said, like, that's it for you. Like, you're done with your Summit Series experience. And it was like later that night when like my moment of revelation just like basically hit me. And it was like, I've been working for a year on this. I loved it. We were serving about 1,000 families with, full range of disabilities. Yeah. We've been doing like all of this work, and that I couldn't live with the knowledge that like my own insecurities were going to allow me to blow this massive opportunity to build something meaningful and worthwhile in the world. And so I looked myself in the mirror, and I just said, you're going back to that fucking hotel tomorrow. And I did. And, I forced my way through 50 conversations with people and glad handing and talking. And by the end of the day, I was completely exhausted. I remember being at happy hour and I leaned up against the wall and I had a cocktail. And this guy comes up to me and he just clinks my glass and he's like, hey, I'm Yannick. And I was like, oh, cool. And Yannick ends up being this internet marketing magnate. I'm so exhausted at that point in the day that I basically just say, like, what do you do for fun? And Yannick says, I play ice hockey. And I was like, oh, that's funny. We have a clinic with the Washington Capitals coming up next week. I was like, you should come. And he's like, can I bring my son? I said, yeah. So Yannick ends up bringing his son. He's so taken by the event that he becomes our first major donor, which allows me to go full-time with Dreams for Kids. And that was the one donation that allowed me to go full-time with Dreams for Kids. I've never worked for anyone else another day in my entire life. And none of it would have happened if I hadn't been at that event. And so there was that immediate kind of like understanding of the importance of being in that room. But it was only like a few weeks after where I just started to realize that if I couldn't exist in these rooms with the people that I admired, that inspired me, that I wanted to work with, I was not only limiting the potential success of Dreams for Kids or any business I was going to run, but I was putting a cap on the people that I could date, the people that I could befriend. And I just wasn't okay with it. And so that was the moment when my mom is like a 9-time published author in the realm of communication. And I just understood that communicating effectively, articulating the value of my ideas, that these things were going to be essential to my success and my happiness. And that's what really started me on the journey of exploring this and committing myself to it and just being endlessly fascinated by it.
Wow. I had no idea about any of these stories.
Yeah, man.
So they're incredibly inspiring and interesting to hear because, I see the man in front of me today, and we've known each other for 3-4 years now. And, you're always the life of the party and connecting with everyone. And even when I built my website, areyoubeingrreal.com, I was looking to your sites and kind of what copy you had on there. And as I was researching for this conversation, I did a nice It's Andrew Horn deep dive, and I watched your first TEDx talk.
Yeah.
And it was just cracked me up watching it because I could see how uncomfortable you were giving this talk. And at the same time, the fundamentals of not looking for answers, but instead starting with questions, such a big part still of everything that you stand for. So it was really cool to see your transformation, watching your first TEDx talk, and then watching your second TEDx talk, which was at Burning Man, with a great outfit, by the way. Everyone definitely check out Andrew's TEDx talk.
Gold booty shorts and the Ringmaster jacket.
Yes, the maroon Ringmaster jacket was incredible. Then to most recently see a talk that you gave at Google.
Yeah.
On creating meaningful connections. So thank you for being such a trailblazer and leading the way. So you did Dream for Kids and then the Ability List in Washington, D.C. and then moved to New York, it sounds like. And then you've got this incredible company now called Tribute. And I think it's amazing because it's all about acknowledgement. And I'm just going to let you give us the 411 on what Tribute is and where that came from. Your whole TEDx talk, your second one, the one at Burning Man, is all about that, and it's brilliant. So I'd recommend everyone to definitely do a deep dive and watch that. But what do we need to know about Tribute and where that came from, how it started, and what people can take away from it?
Yeah. So, tribute was inspired by a really, really great gift about 4 years ago. So on my 27th birthday, I was in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and my wife, Mickey, is basically taking me out for a little drink, and then she's going to take me back to the place, and she has a whole dinner plan. And so I'm like, great, this sounds amazing. I told her I didn't want to do anything with the group. So we go out for the drink. We get back to my apartment. I swing the door open, and the first thing I see is like 20 pairs of random shoes sitting on the floor. And so I'm like, what is this? And then 1, 2, 3, 25 of my best friends all jump out. Basically, surprise party. Everyone comes up, gives me this massive hug. Everyone's hanging out. It's amazing. And then halfway through the party, Mickey stands up on the table and she says, all right, everyone in the living room. So everyone scuttles over to the living room, and then she puts up this big projection screen, and then she puts this video on it. And I have no idea what's going on. I'm just sitting in the back of the room, totally confused. And she hits play. And what I didn't know is that Mickey had taken about 16 hours to reach out to all of my closest friends and family members. And she asked them one question: why do you love Andrew? And I sat in the back of that room as my father came on the screen telling me how much he loved me, which is not a word he often uses, even though I felt it. My mom comes up and tells me how grateful she is that I helped her to build her business. My friend Matt comes onto the screen, and I get goosebumps telling it, but he tells me that I'm his best friend for the first time. And it's this thing that I had felt with Matt for 2 years, but as a grown man, it's a strange thing to tell someone that they're your best friend as an adult. And it was in that moment that I just started bawling, and I kept crying for the next 20 minutes. And I came out of that experience and I looked at everyone and I just said, this is the best gift I've ever received. I felt like I had just watched my eulogy at 27 instead of, when I'm in a casket or buried, whatever it might be. And I look at Mickey and I say, how the hell did you do this? And she looks back at me, doesn't blink, and just says, it sucked. And I was like, what do you mean? And she tells me the whole story of, again, emailing people hundreds of times, of collecting videos through Dropbox, Drive, email.
Slow to respond.
Exactly. And then editing everything together in iMovie. Yeah. So I literally walked into the other room, and within 30 seconds, I had the name. I said, this is a tribute. And I was like, I need to share this with the world. And what started as this mission to basically share my experience that night has grown into this global movement of, 120,000 tributes now, partnerships with people like the Cleveland Clinic, Zappos. We're getting ready to launch a dementia product. So basically allowing people who are losing the memories and understanding of their relationships with the people in their lives to give them those memories back. But as I've really embarked on this journey of meaningful conversation, human connection, what I've really understood about tribute is that for me, this was really one of the linchpin moments in my ability to kind of like overcome shyness and the social anxiety that I had dealt with. And what I really understood here is that, the essence of most shyness and social anxiety is a lack of self-esteem. It is basically kind of like just a belief in your own value. And there's a lot of research that basically says that like the most effective way to build strong self-esteem is strong familial and parental relationships, where it all starts, and strong social ties. And so for me, I had always had strong friends and relationships, but the difference between tribute is that I never fully grasped how valued I was by the people in my life. And so for the first time, when I was sitting here, I'd been struggling and hustling on businesses and wanting to appear successful to the world and wanting to be a good partner and wanting to be all of these things. And it was the first time in my life that I got to shut up my brain and just accept this love and say, you're doing what you're supposed to be here, what you're here to do. It's like you are loved and admired by the people that mean the most to you. And it was this new understanding of purpose. And I just realized that if I can just do that I will live a full life. And so to be able to give people the gift of tribute, of recognition, is such a powerful thing, because it's not just a nice thing to feel, but it has so many of these kind of transitive properties that lead to people being more confident, more alive. And so it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to share with the world.
It's incredible. And 125,000 tributes.
Yeah, man,
that is
fun.
a lot. That's a lot of people involved, giving love. And, hopefully that's something that transcended, to other areas of their life, because it is so true that, we go to a funeral and we hear all these great things that someone did in their lives. And, oftentimes we don't take the time to celebrate each other, or maybe we just don't do it as often as we could. And I mentioned this example a couple weeks ago on the show, but I had a friend that was telling me, encouraging me to go travel abroad alone. And I said, I get why you love doing that so much because you tap into like a superhero version of yourself when you travel alone. And I said, when I travel alone, I find that inner voice, that inner critic gets louder. And I said, that's part of the reason why I love being in Venice and being surrounded by people that I know and that I love. And everywhere I go, I run into all these people with smiley faces. I went out to breakfast today with someone. I knew 3 people at the restaurant. It was so exciting and cool. And it's because that inner critic can be so loud that I forget who I am. And I can become that inner critic. So the love, the acknowledgement of others is just such a gift. And it's such an easy gift to give, right? It's just so easy to do it. So it's something that, has become a daily ritual for me with my birthday experiment, sending personalized videos to everyone on their birthdays. And, there's some days where I don't know why I'm doing it, but, it's just giving for the sake of giving. And, at the end of the day, we want to feel like we're here for a reason and that we matter and have importance and significance. And the easiest way that we can give that gift to others, because we all want to be seen and valued and appreciated, is just simply by being a reflection and letting people know, the gold that we see in them or what we appreciate most of them. And, not only does it feel great to receive love and acknowledgement, but it's also a beautiful gift to give that, and it'll likely strengthen the bond in a way that will be the gift that keeps on giving long term. So you've got many, many masterful tips on on the art of acknowledgement. And there's a couple of them that popped up to me. One is the last line of that second TED Talk. So I wanted to invite you to share that. And then a message that you posted in a blog post on Valentine's Day a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I gave you enough to know exactly what
I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah.
It's funny. I know we have a mutual friend in Taylor Conroy.
Yeah.
And so this thought that ended the second TEDx talk at Burning Man actually happened while we were biking around the Esplanade. So essentially what I realized in this moment, I was getting ready to give this, I think, 12-minute TEDx talk at Burning Man, Black Rock City. And I had this moment of recognition of this statement that I had heard hundreds of times growing up, and I know that everyone listening probably has as well. But that feeling when you just tease someone on the playground, or you do something to a sibling that you shouldn't have, and your parents look at you and they say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And I was just looking at that, and I literally wrote it down on a piece of paper, and then I just crossed out the don'ts. And what I realized is that the statement becomes, if you have anything nice to say it all. And I thought about how this message was not only infinitely more powerful, but one that is completely neglected, is that we are full of appreciation for the people, the organizations that make our lives amazing, but we build up this barrier to expressing it. And, there is some anxiety around really sharing our authentic appreciation because we don't know, is this warranted? Am I going to make this person feel uncomfortable? Are they not going to reciprocate it? When the reality of it is that anytime you hear appreciation from someone, it feels good. So you're always going to make someone feel good. And it's just your truth. And that there's no reason that anytime you feel some sort of admiration, appreciation, gratitude for someone or something, express it. Because it is an active practice of gratitude, which is literally the most effective path to happiness, is just to acknowledge what's going right in your world. But to actually share that with people, I think, is literally one of the most effective and positive habits someone can develop.
Absolutely. And I'm just kind of laughing even thinking about this, that it's such an important message. And for whatever reason, it's not the status quo. It makes no sense to me how this is not the most basic information. I mean, it is kind of taught as kids, but it's not really reinforced, throughout life. And there's a lot of people who, focus on romantic relationship advice and, their career advice, but basic human interaction advice, I feel like there really is a shortage of. And to me, that's why there's so much social awkwardness and discomfort, because quite frankly, there's really no rule book or guidebook as to how to best communicate with others. So I think of the masterpiece, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And even that book, when I read that for the first time, it still left something to be desired. And,
What do you think?
Yeah,
Go ahead. No, I mean, you think about kind of the world that we are growing up in and how little the education system has transformed. And it's like we spend 15 years of our life studying social studies, which is a beautiful thing and is a lot of fun to learn. And we spend 15 minutes, or less on social skills of like actually teaching young people how to articulate their ideas, of how to connect with people, of how to ask questions, of social cues, whatever these might be. And again, in a world of AI and exponential technology, the last thing that these technologies will be able to replicate is true, profound human connection. And so these types of things are what are most valuable, what truly make people successful today. I mean, if you look at a fun study that just came out of Stanford, they were basically looking at Stanford postgraduates, and they were trying to determine what are the factors that can determine success of our graduate students. And after, I believe it was a 10-year study, they found out that it wasn't grades, it wasn't their economic kind of status coming in, it wasn't even really who they knew. It was something they called verbal fluency. Is that they said that people who have the ability to talk about their ideas, their services, and their talents are those that consistently outperformed others in their class. And so, you think about literally any skill that you could have. And, Stanford just determined that it's the ability to talk about what you need to talk about.
Yeah.
So, it's such a valuable skill and one that's so undertaught. And I completely agree with you that, the most seminal communication books of our time came out before personal devices, came out before social media, came out before we were more polarized as a country than ever before. It came out before, like 80% of people were sleeping with a phone next to their bed and 85% of people touched their phone during conversations. It's like all these crazy cultural factors that are basically moving people further and further away from the ability to just be present in conversation. And so that's why it's such a fun journey to now be able to share my own struggle so authentically with the people that may be experiencing that right now. And I like to think that like for anyone who's looking for purpose, I think that again, it's like we all have an opportunity to connect with purpose by just asking ourselves, where did I struggle when I was coming of age? And if you look back to your own struggle, what you experienced, it's that I guarantee you that there are people that are experiencing that right now. And as we grow older and as we, basically kind of build up skills and different experiences, we can actually be very uniquely helpful to the people that are now experiencing that same adversity in their lives, because we're smarter now, we're more capable. And so if we're looking for deep purpose, it's just look at what you struggled with growing up, take the skills you have now and apply them to help those people, because that's where you can really magnify your impact in a really unique way that no one else can. And like it's fun to be in that place right now and really starting to share that.
It's beautiful. And I definitely can empathize with that. I've always considered myself to be a social person, but with someone who I had never had a relationship with. And, here I am at a networking event and, have a moment to grab someone's attention and to create connection and to maybe be inquisitive or to pitch them on whatever it is, the flavor of the day that, that I'm selling or that I want to talk about. I found that to be so incredibly challenging and not really knowing where to start. So, for me, it's been awesome to do a deep dive and to, do my Andrew Horn 101 course by reading all the stuff that you have up on social media. So I do have a bunch of follow-up questions to your one-on-one work, but I before we do that, I know you're a wizard with question asking. So I wanted to see if you could give the listeners here of the show the gift of some go-to questions that people can have in their arsenal.
Yeah.
So if you ever find yourself in an uncomfortable situation, don't know where to start, don't know what to say, that are great questions to build meaningful connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I always like to lead with is something that I call the golden rule of questions. And so the golden rule of life that we've all heard a million times, do unto others as you would like done unto yourself, right? So the golden rule of questions is ask questions to others that you would want to be asked yourself. Mm-hmm. And so it's again, so if you're asking people, how'd you get here today? What do you do? Do you personally want to answer those questions? And if the answer is yes, then you're doing great. But if the answer is no, if you want to talk about inspiration, if you want to talk about challenge, if you want to talk about dreams, then you have to be the person asking those questions. And so rather than give some of the templatized questions, which I certainly have, and I'll get to those, but there's actually one question that anyone can ask before any important meeting, any date, any investor pitch, whatever that might be. And this one question will establish something that I call the curiosity compass. And so the curiosity compass is this authentic curiosity that you can trust to lead you on a path to meaningful connection. And that one question is, what am I most excited to learn about this person? So if you just think about that, like before I come down here and I sit with Mark, and it's again, I've built up my curiosity like a muscle. So I do this naturally. But 2 years ago, before every meeting, I would actually write down, what am I most excited to learn about this person? So that when I sit down with Mark, I want to know what's most challenging for him right now. What has he learned about as an interviewer? What's allowed him to find his authentic voice while asking questions? How is winning weeks going? Whatever it may be. But if you just take the time to say, what am I most excited to learn about this person? Then you take the pressure off of portraying an image of who you need to be to someone. And now you're focused on learning. And there's always going to be fulfillment in learning because you're going to be growing. And what happens when you're asking someone questions and listening is that you're going to make them feel seen. And anytime, you've all been there in conversation where someone asks you a question and they listen and they ask a follow-up question and you turn away and you walk away and you're like, fuck, like that person was like, they got me. That is a gift that we so seldom receive. So again, the question of, what do I most want to learn about this person? If you just take literally a minute before any call or any big meeting, it will transform the dynamic of that interaction. And in terms of like my favorite questions, I actually do think that it's important to develop what I would call your go-to questions. Yogi Berra was like this famous Yankees catcher, like the most quotable man ever. And he has this incredible saying, and he would say, you can't think and hit at the same time. And I love that. And it's like in any fast-paced environment with dynamic variables, it's if you are thinking about what you want to say next, if you are thinking about how you are perceived, you're not going to be present. You're not going to be portraying yourself in the light that you would like to be. And so go-to questions are basically taking the time to ask yourself, what am I generally most interested in when I meet people? And so for me, I find that, there's generally 5 of these that people really resonate with. And so the first is, what are you most excited about? And so if you think about transferring from what do you do to what are you most excited about? And then they would say, well, what, work or personal? And I'd say, anything. And so, what are you most excited about? Whatever that may be. So immediately you're going to be triggering a response internally in someone that they have this positive reference point. So it immediately like heightens the energy to a positive state right there. And if the person isn't willing to go there right off the bat, what I oftentimes say with deep questions is that it is not your first question that is your real question. Is that if you're not willing to ask at least one follow-up question, then you weren't really trying. So when you're actually trying to transition into these deeper questions, be prepared to ask a follow-up question, to go deeper, to ask something else. But so what are you most excited about? Take it right there. One of the next is to bring it back to the opposite side of the spectrum and to ask people what's most challenging right now. Because again, you could be crushing it. You could be making millions of dollars every single week. You could have the best family in the world, whatever it may be, and you could still be struggling with your back. And what's so seldom in today's society is having an opportunity to talk about our challenges, to talk about these struggles that are so real. And so when we can give people an opportunity to talk about these challenges that are ever present, part of the human condition, like it's just going to be interesting because it allows us to talk about our own struggles, but that's the stuff that they don't get to talk about as often. That's the stuff that's going to be really valuable. But I also feel there's just so much meat to be had there. And then my favorite, like always, is that when you come from that place is, what is the dream? So when you go to what is the dream is just giving people a place to talk about what it is that they really want to do. And like at the end of the day, getting people out of the minutia of circumstance of what they're doing right now and saying, a great frame here for what is the dream is, if you could not fail, what would you do next? Is that remove all shred of doubt for somebody. If you could not fail, what would you do next? And I've always loved that one. And Emerson used to throw these epic dinner parties, the poet, and one of his questions was, since we last met, what hath become clear to you? And so I don't recommend that you use that one in conversation because that would be a little weird. What you can ask people is, what have you learned recently that's been helpful? Mm-hmm. So again, giving people an opportunity to think about what they've learned. It's that, again, it's that it doesn't matter. Like if you view someone as beneath you or not as experienced, it's that, wisdom is equally distributed and people have different experiences and can share about their wisdom, and it's always nice to just be directly learning in that way. So those are 4 of my favorites. And then I think again of just what's the next big thing that you have coming up, of like actually looking at strategically, what is the next big thing that someone has coming up in their lives? Because again, something else that is relevant that you can actually kind of contribute on, that you can converse on, that's obviously top of mind for them. So those are 5, what I would consider go-to questions that you can bring into any conversation to immediately take it to a level of depth. But again, at the end of the day, it just has to be something that you genuinely want the answer to. That's it.
If you're game for it, I'd love to ask you a couple of follow-up questions in that regard. Okay, so one that I'll start out with is I'll go to events like Summit Series or just other random events where I'll see someone and I'll recognize them, whether it's a celebrity or if it's Gary Vaynerchuk. I saw him on the boat at Summit Series last year, and I'll see these people who I would love to have as guests on my podcast because I feel like they're so authentic and real, and it would have so much to offer and give to the audience. And I find myself not knowing how to engage with them. So I'm curious as to, in those kind of situations, because I'm probably not alone, you see someone who is maybe a dream client or, star of your favorite movie and you want to connect with them. I'm curious if you have any tips in those kind of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a conversation with my friend Alex Benayan, who has an amazing book that just came out called The Third Door.
Third Door.
And one of the things that he talks about is how you have to choose between being a fan or a friend in any given moment.
Okay.
And so I like to think about that where, even when it comes to sharing appreciation and those types of things, I think that for, when you're looking at celebrities and people that are in the public eye, it's that when you approach someone from that angle, they are that same thing in their eye now. You are someone who has seen them publicly, that's talking about the thing they've done, as opposed to relating someone like you would at a bar normally, which is where you go up to just understand who they are, as opposed to their public-facing accomplishments and everything else. And so I think that, again, coming back into curiosity, which is always the thing of just, what do you want to know about this person aside from their public-facing accomplishments, as though you don't know anything about that person. And so, I mean, anytime I see those people, again, that's just a natural thing of like, in those moments, you can't plan a great deal of anything other like, oh, what would I like to know about this person? You know what I mean? And if you do with some of those people, like I had an experience recently of, I saw James Murphy from LCD Sound System.
So good.
And, I just brought so much joy into my life. And like, I just remember that in that moment, I was like, I'm not going to be a friend. I'm just going to be a fan. And then when I did that, I was like, he was reading a book on the subway. We read the same, I see him all the time because he's on the L train, but he was reading this book and I just went over and I was like, hey, James, I just want to let you know that your music has really brought a lot of joy into my life. And I wanted to say thank you. And like that, again, was just like sharing appreciation, you know what I mean? And so it was a different thing. But so in terms of eliminating some of the anxieties around seeing those people, I think that, again, having a well-articulated curiosity that's there, but then also it's that, when we find people who we deem as more experienced, more famous, smarter than we are, it really kind of like hypes up that internal dialogue, those feelings of not being enough. And so I think that our brains are so good at telling us what is going to go wrong, because it's literally like this kind of like caveman impulse that's literally responding to impulses from thousands and thousands of years ago, where if we were ostracized by our tribe, we would lose status and then we get kicked out of the tribe. And if we're kicked out of the tribe, we're going to starve to death. And obviously, like, those impulses are no longer that helpful. But so our brain is naturally going to tell us what's going to go wrong when I'm walking up to James Franco at a party and he's not going to think that I'm cool. He's not going to do this stuff. So there's a process that I frequently use and talk about, and it's called the metamorphic two-step. So anytime that you're heading into one of these high pressure situations, be that a Summit Series high level network event, be that a podcast or a public presentation, I learned this from a friend of mine who's a very high level hypnotist. And so essentially what he would do is he would like help people who have any sort of anxieties. And he would say, okay, so what are you afraid of? And so in this moment, you just think to yourself, okay, so what am I worried about? I'm worried that I walk up to James Franco and James Franco just shrugs me off or like turns around. I'm worried that James Franco is going to think that I'm totally awkward, whatever it might be. So you articulate what the fear is of this social situation. So even by putting words to that kind of like sub-perceptual fear, you're taking a little bit of control over it. Mm-hmm. But then the second thing is the most important. And so the second thing is that you actually articulate your desired state of being. And so you actually say to yourself with 3 characteristics, how do I want to be at this networking event? So if I'm at Summit Series and I see James Franco, I go in knowing that my 3 things are, I want to be confident, I want to be present, and I want to be authentic. So CPA. And it's important that you give yourself 3 things because your brain thinks in threes like that and will recall it. And so again, now you're grounded in curiosity, but you also have your desired states of being. So again, I want to be confident, present, and authentic. And so anytime my brain is responding to one of those negative impulses, rather than not knowing how to respond to that and getting uncomfortable and avoidant, what I do is I say, what would I do if I was being confident? What would I do if I was being present, if I was being authentic? And you're more grounded into the state of being that you would actually like. So again, it's a very natural thing to feel those, but it's just having taken the time when, you know, these feelings are very, very common, which we don't talk about again. Like no one knows this, but literally more than 50% of people on earth struggle with shyness. You know what I mean? They're avoidant to social situations. They cough up their words and they struggle and they stumble and they sweat. 10% of people struggle with severe social anxiety. Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of saying, okay, what do I want to learn about people? How do I want to be? Those 2 things alone will just have you showing up in the world the way that you actually want to exist.
So simple. So my next question for you, I'm really curious about, is about what friendship really even means, and you know, is it important to differentiate between close friends and acquaintances? You know, are they different? Should they be different? Should we have different expectations from each? I just would love to get your perspective on this question.
Yeah, it's something I think a great deal about, and I think that it is something that's very important to define. Before we got into the podcast, Mark and I were talking about the power of asking for exactly what you want in relationships. And I think, again, the power of defining what meaningful connection looks like is that you can more effectively evaluate what you might be missing. And so for me, I think of meaningful friendships and relationships as VAST. So VAST. So V, vulnerable. Can I be my true self here? A, appreciation. Do I feel seen, heard, and valued? T, trust. Can I trust this person to do what they say? This one is much more about action than the vulnerability, who they are. And the S is, so I went T before S, but the S is support. And the really important thing about here is that it's not only feeling supported, but for me, your best friends should be the people that you are inspired to support. Think about that for a second. Think about the people in your life that when they need something, you are inspired to help them. Think about the people that you feel great about supporting their projects because you believe about the impact that they're having in the world. Because again, I believe that the most effective way to connect and to feel a sense of purpose and value is to be of service to another person. That was how I first connected to my purpose. But anytime you are helping someone else, you are going to immediately see that you have value. So if you surround yourself with the people that you are naturally called to support, you are always going to feel as though you have value. And if you trust those people and if you believe in the impact they're having in the world, then you're also going to be impacting the external world. So that support piece is so important. But I think, again, having that construct of VAST allows you to actually understand kind of like the components of meaningful connection, what you have, what you don't have. And again, if you want something to be a meaningful relationship to you, if you want deep connection, you seek that, then you have a right to ask for what you need. And then someone has an opportunity to say, like, I can't give you that. But what's great is that when you push aside the relationships that are not serving you, you make space for the ones that do. And that is a scary thing to say, here's what I need, what I'm not, to voice that. And you give that person an opportunity to either rise to the occasion. That's a win. They either step aside and they say, no, I can't do that. And then what happens is now you have clarity around that relationship, which wasn't serving you to begin with. And you can now make room for other ones. And I talk a lot about, how to do that, because I think that, again, whoever taught you how to make friends? Who taught you how to do that? Was there ever a class for it? It's like, and there's so much data and science and research that backs up that strong social ties are literally like one of probably the most important factor for long-term health is how strong are your social ties. It's like, again, you're going to smoke less, you're going to eat better, you're going to go to doctor's visits, you're going to exercise, you're going to have like literally a higher white blood cell count to fight diseases. You know what I mean? It's like you're going to have more emotional and mental resilience when we have strong ties. And so it's such an important thing to really be able to think consciously and intentionally about, am I getting what I need for my community? And if not, how do I actually go out and build that?
All right, I got to ask one more question before we get into the true challenge.
Please.
Your research skills are seriously like next level, like next level squared. Do you have like certain sites or like what kind of tips? Because like you always throw out great stats. They're always like the exact right stat to share as well at the right moment. So
that is a great question to ask, and yes, I do. So this is something that I often introduce in like my business presentations when I'm working more on what I call like influencing with integrity. So how to kind of like bottle up your authentic passion for a business, an idea, a project, and really articulate the value so people will get it, care about it, and want to support you. And I always talk about this as the easiest way to introduce your idea in 60 seconds is what I would call shocking statistics. And so whatever your body of work may be, so let's say that for Mark, it's authenticity. Let's say that for Mickey, it is menstrual hygiene, or feminism. For Taylor, it's impact travel. So there's this wonderful term that we empower all of our interns with at Tribute. It's called GTS, and it stands for Google That Shit. And so you just say that any question you ever have, just take it to Auntie Google before you bring it to us. Yeah. But so if you just do this for whatever your industry is, type in shocking statistics about X. Okay, nice. So think about this. So these statistics that I bring out, shocking statistics about loneliness, shocking statistics about social anxiety, shocking statistics about relationships. If you type that in for whatever your industry is, it applies to, classic industry as well. Shocking statistics about plastics, shocking statistics about shipping, whatever it may be, you're going to get at least 3 to 4 of those foundational kind of eye-opening statistics. And what happens is that when you use statistics, especially in the world of coaching and facilitating that you're very planted in, it's like people can oftentimes throw these things off as like frou-frou or high level or ethereal, whatever it may be. And so statistics are a way to ground what you're talking about in this real world perspective. And so that's a really powerful way. But so again, whatever your industry is, shocking statistics about X. And I promise you, you'll get 3 statistics that you can use to introduce what you're working on and say, this is why it matters, not just why I'm passionate about it.
So as we wrap this up, a few final questions. What can we do to support you?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I would say go to tribute.co and think about who is your best friend, your family member, maybe even a coworker, and anyone who has an important birthday coming up, Mother's Day, Father's Day. There's no reason that the kind of things you think in your head shouldn't be expressed. So I would say, especially for your parents, as Mother's Day and Father's Day come up, a lot of us now have aging parents. You never know how much time you have left. Do it now. Literally just do it now. You owe it to them and everything they've given to you. So tribute.co to do that. If any of you guys ever want to have me out to speak on the Art of Meaningful Conversation, you can just go to itsandrewhorn.com. And I do a lot of work on that front around the world. And I always love sharing the message and connecting with people. And so it's andrewhorn.com, tribute.co, and it's Andrew Horn on all social platforms.
Definitely check out all of those. So Andrew, thank you so much. So is there anything else that you feel inclined to share? Maybe you were thinking about as you were biking over, or just any other things you want to close off this conversation with?
Yeah, I want to leave you guys with something that's been on my mind recently. And that is the nuzzle. And so the nuzzle is this thing that I want us all to think about when we find ourselves really triggered in any conversation, whether that be with someone that you disagree with on Facebook, whether it be with a parent who's overeating. Anytime you find yourself triggered in a conversation, I want you to remember that there's this thing called the backfire effect. And when we tell people why what they are doing is wrong, the actual response on their end is literally to reaffirm their current belief. So by telling people what they are doing and why it is wrong right off the bat, you are reaffirming the very belief that you are trying to change. And so when we disagree with people, and again, in a time when we're more polarized as a society than ever, just remember to identify how your ultimate objectives are likely similar, of freedom, safety, happiness. Like we have that in common.
Yeah.
Of trying to understand people and asking questions more than telling people why they're wrong, because ultimately it is the way for us to connect, to evolve, and to grow, as opposed to moving more and more into this like toxically tribal kind of like team system that is not working for a lot of people. So that's something that's been on my mind recently. I think that we can all be a little more aware and conscious of.
Cool. Thank you so much for leaving us with that. And I couldn't agree more. Oftentimes what's at the root of our desires is the same, whether it's, you're in a romantic relationship, you probably just love each other a lot. And that's actually because there's something else that's a little off, but you have the same ultimate vision that, you want to build a long-standing relationship together. So to not focus on the problem instead of focusing on the vision, ultimate deep down root vision, I think is very, very valuable. So Andrew, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure. I'm excited to have you back when the book comes out. Is that going to be 2019?
2019. I'll be here,
All
baby.
Right, wonderful. Let's do it up. The one and only Andrew Horn.
Tweet it out.